Okay, so I've had a number of people ask about, hey, can you install OPNsense on an EliteDesk or a ProDesk and turn it into, I guess, a firewall slash DNS, the whole thing. But basically, they wanted to know if you could install OPNsense on it. Generally, in order to have OPNsense, you need at least two network ports. So, on a prior video, I showed how you can install a second NIC onto a G3. This right here is the native one, and here is the new guy. Both of them are Intel, which supposedly works better with OPNsense. And I believe, let's see, did I put, yeah, I put this on a ProDesk, actually, a ProDesk 600 G3 Mini. And this is running a i3 6100T, and I put in 16 gig of memory. So watch my other video to see how to put this in. And I'm going to show in this video what we need to do as far as getting this configured and set up. Now, there's a big debate on with OPNsense as far as, do I install it bare metal directly onto the unit? Do I run it as a virtual machine, say under Proxmox? Of course, there's also do I do PFSense versus OPNsense? But we're going to go OPNsense, and we're going to do OPNsense on running under Proxmox for a number of reasons. I did tests where I actually did install bare metal on here, and the configuration, power draw, everything else, it was just a lot easier dealing with Proxmox. Overall, your power draw in either situations are about 9 watts, which is pretty good, because I also took the same stance and said, well, I've got a HP thin client, why don't I install it on that? And the power draw on it was actually twice. It was more in the 15, 16. So I said, well, let's go for lower, power draw and still have the advantages of having a full mini PC. So I'll show you as far as how to get Proxmox set up, some of the little things to look out for, how to install OPNsense. The nice thing is that once you have it running on here under Proxmox, is that you can shut down OPNsense and still be able to connect into the virtual machine, which is something I wanted to be able to do because I just really don't know a whole lot about OPNsense as far as going through all the configurations. And I wanted something where I could do, snapshots and backups of the VM, start all over again, still be able to get into the virtual machine, from another machine without having to worry about, oh shoot, now I've totally messed everything up. I'm going to have to reinstall everything. How do I get connected to the machine, etc. So a couple other things in my demo you're going to need is a second machine, and it doesn't have to be a mini PC, obviously, but you're going to need it in order to either directly connect to here with a network cable or connect to it to a switch. And then, so we have both of these connected into that switch. And of course, that switch is not on the network, but it just acts as the, go-between and the connector between the two machines. So I'm actually, myself, going to use this old Netgear that I've upgraded and put OpenWRT on. This one is actually part of my, kind of sort of mini lab for a while until I switched to a different switch to a different switch, but it still has the old configuration. It's got a couple VLANs on it, etc. And so it makes for a good tester. I've got a couple ports that are set so that anything can connect to it, meaning basically untagged. So I've got this, and I also have an ancient Netgear router. This guy is going to act as essentially kind of like my network modem. This is going to act as the WAN, the connection to the outside world. Not necessarily needed. I just liked it so that way I could confirm that it was getting, let's say, a DHCP address from, outside internet provider. And of course, your usual, you're going to need some additional network cables, etc., for all the connectivity. You're going to need to know how to set the IP address on the machine that's going to be connecting to the Proxmox machine, because you need to be able to set this to a static IP to be able to connect to here. And then probably lastly, you're also going to need a Ventoy that's set up that's got the Proxmox installer on it. And at some point, you're also going to want to download the ISO for the installer for OPNsense. You're going to want to put this on the computer that's going to do all the connectivity over here, because this we're going to use as a way we're going to connect to our Proxmox that's running on here, and we're going to upload the ISO into there so that we can do the installation. So I'll include links on where to go to get the latest Proxmox, the latest OPNsense, etc. One other reason why I liked going with OPNsense versus, let's say, PFSense is I tried to do PFSense. They don't have an offline installer anymore. Everything's got to be connected to the internet in order for it to do the install. And that was causing an issue because I didn't want anything that I'm doing here connected any way to my current network, because I didn't want to mess anything up with it, have everyone screaming at me, hey, what have you done to the network? Or why can't I get to my files, etc. So, another plus for OPNsense. So let's start with the main computer that's going to be running Proxmox. I want to show a couple things that we need to do in the BIOS, things that you may not have thought about before we jump into doing the Proxmox install. One thing you may not have thought about, and this is something actually that came to me after I've been playing with this for hours, is oftentimes this computer that you're going to be putting in here, this firewall, oftentimes is going to be replacing some sort of network appliance, and that might be an existing router. That's what's going to happen in my case, because I'm running OpenWRT on a router. It's acting as my main firewall right now. And those network appliances are made to just, you plug them in, they just start working. Or maybe they're always turned on, and as soon as they get power, they're operating. So in this case, we want the same thing to happen. Most likely, you're going to have this plugged into a UPS. If you lose power at your house and it's all drained out, everything's shut down, when the power comes back and the UPS springs to life, you want everything to come back, to life. And that includes your firewall. And that would be, especially if you're, out and about and, you want to be able to check your cameras at home. You want to be able to, check your lights, all that kind of stuff. That needs to start up automatically. So what we want to do is we want to go into the BIOS menu. We want to go to Advanced. And while we're here, let's check a couple things. So go boot options. This would be the first thing. So after power loss, we want to set it to power on. You could do previous state, but that means that it's just going to go back to, if you actually powered off the unit, it's going to stay powered off. But that's not really what we want, because you might have something set up in which the UPS tells your firewall, hey, you need to shut yourself down. It shuts itself down, and then the power comes back, but it's not coming back. So I would always go with the power on. That way, when juice comes to it, it goes right in. You have to be a little careful, because when you're doing a lot of experimentation, it's going to boot right in. So, be aware of that when you're just plugging in that unit. So, yeah, set it to power on. Now, for the critical settings we need for Proxmox, we want to go into System Options and pretty much turn on all of these: hyper-threading, multiprocessor, virtualization technology, and virtualization technology for directed I/O. You're going to need this for anything where you want to pass devices through to your VMs. So I discovered that myself when I was doing some testing and I couldn't get it to work. This was off. So these 4 here, I would have on, go back here, and then you'll be able to go to main and then do save changes and exit. So now I've booted into Ventoy. I have on here already my Proxmox, and I'm going to run through here and do the installation. Now when we get to it, I'll show you really the most important part is to pick the right network connection, so that way you're not picking the new added on NIC, you're picking the built-in one. Okay, we'll agree. All right, I already have a internal 2230 that I'm going to be installing onto. If I type in the country that I'm interested in, so I'll do United States, you could pick your time zone, your language, password. Now here, management interface. So I've got two choices. I've got EN01, and then I've got this guy along with the MAC address. Now, if you look up the MAC address for ACE2D3, it's going to say that it's HP. If you look up this one, I forget the particular name of it, but it's definitely not HP, some Chinese company that made the particular adapter. So we want to pick the HP one. I'm going to call mine pvelan.lan. Okay, now IP address, very important. I'm going to put, assuming that most people, maybe their network is set up for 192.168.1. something. I'm just picking this. Now, that's up to you as far as how you want to do it. You just need to know that doing something in the .1 is going to be convenient, because that, by default, OPNsense is going to be listening on 192.168.1.1. So this way we'll set it to .80. That's going to be for the Proxmox server itself. And then we'll probably set a third IP address for the computer that's going to be connecting to Proxmox to do all the configuration, because everything through Proxmox is done through a web interface. Our gateway, we'll do it as 1.1. DNS isn't truly important now, but for now we'll just do this. All right, we'll say next. Looks at all the settings, and we'll say install. And then this is going to go through, create the partitions, get everything set up, and then we'll reboot, and then we'll go in and set up the actual OPNsense VM. If while running this you get an error that says it was unable to create the partitions, and I ran into this sometimes if I'm using a disk that I've used for other sorts of things, particularly for maybe I've put Linux, something like that. What I did was I took the 2230, pulled it out, and reformatted it. And as it turns out, if I reformatted it as NTFS, then when I ran through this, everything was fine. It also seems to be okay if I do Proxmox on top of existing Proxmox. Seems to be okay also. Okay, it's just wrapping up. And what should happen is that we'll get essentially, hey, it's all ready. And then you'll see it come up where we're going to need to unplug our Ventoy disk so it doesn't try to load it up again. See, it's doing its little countdown. And starting, terminate all. And right there, please remove the ISO boot media. You'll get the errors, don't worry about it. And if all work, you should see something like this. And it's going to load up, and eventually we'll also get a login prompt. Okay, so if we see this, we're doing good. We're going to be connecting to that 192.168.1.80:8006, because that's the port. So now what we need to do is bring up our secondary machine and get it set up so that way it can pop into Proxmox and we can continue the rest of the installation. So what I've done is I've taken an Ethernet cable, connected it directly from the Ethernet port on this computer that I'm going to be playing with or using as sort of the client, and connected it to the HP Ethernet port on the Proxmox machine, Proxmox / OPNsense machine. And we'll go ahead and log in. What we'll want to do right away is change the IP address of this machine, this client machine, so that it has a static IP, so that way it can connect directly to that Proxmox machine. So what we want to do is down here, depending on how your setup is, you want to look for either something that might look like either where it says you've got some sort of internet access through your Wi-Fi. It might have a little globe there, various ways, but we want to right click on it and go to network and internet settings. Now in my case, I have Wi-Fi set up, so I don't want to have it getting an IP address from somewhere else. So I'm going to say disable. And also for anything like Bluetooth, also disable it. We do want to keep this one active, but we want to set a static IP. So we want to click on the down arrow. We want to go to more adapter options. We want to find the Internet Protocol version 4. And here, instead of saying obtain automatically, we want to put in an IP address. And in our case, we'll just choose 100 as the one to use. 192.168.1.100. It will fill in the subnet mask. That's the one to use. And gateway will be 1.1. You don't really have to care too much about the DNS. We can leave that as is. Then we can say OK. And now we'll be able to connect to our Proxmox machine. Now that we have our static IP, we can connect to that Proxmox server. So we'll launch our browser, go to 192.168.180:8006. Username is root. And then the password is the one that we put in when we were doing the installation. Don't worry about that. One of the things we want to do right away is upload the ISO for the OPNsense. Local PVE LAN, and then click on ISO images. Ignore this. I had to film this after everything because I didn't have footage on how to do this. We click on upload, select our file, and here's the ISO. Say OK and upload. This will be used later when we do the actual installation of OPNsense. Should see something like this when it's finished. And now we have the OPNsense ISO. One thing we want to do before we start doing the installs, we want to click on PVE LAN, go to network. You'll notice that we currently have a Linux bridge, this one that's pointing to EN01. This network device is the one that got added onto the system. So if we do edit, just so we can get this name into the clipboard, I'm just going to right click, get it in, copy. I want to come down here. I want to say create Linux bridge, go to bridge ports, paste it in. And for a comment, I'm going to say WAN. So we're going to be using this particular NIC as the NIC that's going to connect to our cable modem, our fiber modem, etc. So we'll say create. We'll go over to our original one. We'll go to edit. And for that one, we'll say LAN because that's the one that's going to connect to everything on our network. Now, always make sure you do all this to hit apply configuration. Okay, so we've got these two. Now, we want to go over to PVE LAN, say create VM, type in OPNsense for our name. So these next screens for setting up the VM, you can play with them. There's different opinions on it. And there's different videos on it. Trying to do the one that's the simplest and will get us to where we want to be. So we'll say next. Okay, this is where ISO image, the storage is local because that's where we uploaded to. There's our OPNsense. Say next. Again, some people will do different things with the BIOS, the machine. We're just going to keep them as is. For disk, let's go with about 64 gig. Say next. In my case, I'm going to give it 2-core because it's a dual core system, but it has hyper-threading, so you actually do have 4-core. One thing I did do, and a lot of people suggested it, is I did turn on this AES. So we'll say next. For memory, I'm going to go with the 8192, basically 8 gig. I do have 16 gig in the system, but I like to start out with the 8 gig. Why be wasteful when you could use that particular memory for something else? But we can always boost it up later after the fact. Say next. Now this will be a little different. What we want to do is we want to create, or I should say we want to pick the WAN. And you'll see later we're going to add both of them together, but for simplicity and the way things work with OPNsense, let's pick the WAN for the first one. Say next. We don't want to start it after creation. You'll notice also in the various settings, I didn't have it where we wanted to auto start when the Proxmox comes up. We can do that later when we feel comfortable with everything and such. We can always set that. But for now, let's just say finish. Takes it a little bit. It's got the little question mark. You'll know it's working when it actually changes to the name OPNsense. Okay, good. So we've got that. We want to go to hardware. We've got this network device. And just kind of, I mean, it's all going to be different ones for MAC addresses when you run it, but we're going to want to keep track of these last 4 numerics because we're going to say add network device. We want to add the one that we didn't, which was the LAN. We'll say add. Okay. For the WAN, it ends in F4. And the LAN ends in 43. So we'll remember that for later on. So F4 and 43. Okay. And now we can come here, go to console, and say start. And what that should do is that it's going to boot from that ISO and run the installer for us. Now you can do this a couple different ways. I'm going to show you one. It's going to come to a part where we can hit an enter key and we can set the interface. Okay, any key. No, we don't want the configuration importer. That's if you're bringing in another one. We'll just let it do its thing. Okay, so we want to, I pressed a key because right where it says to start the manual interface assignment. Do you want to configure lags now? Hit return because it's going to default to no. We don't want to do it. We don't want to do any VLANs right now. Okay, now for the WAN interface, you'll see up here, here's our F4 and here's our 43. Okay, and then over here are the names that are in the system. Now, if I was installing this bare metal, these would look very different as far as the naming. So for the WAN interface, we want to use this first one. So I'm going to type in VT net 0 return. Okay, now what do we want to use for the LAN interface? Okay, VT net 1. We don't have an optional, so we're just going to hit return. Do we want to proceed? Yes, we do. So we have to type a Y this time. And it will go through the rest of it as far as the setup. The WAN interface always seems to get hung up right here, no matter how I do it. So later on, it's not an issue, but just so you know, I've seen it take, or I should say snag on this for close to a minute. So don't panic if it looks like something is, haywire. Just wait and it will do its thing. All right, it's gotten past the WAN interface. Doing a couple more setups. Okay, so since this is the first time we're doing this install, the login is installer. Password is OPNsense, basically OPNsense. Return. Okay, we'll just say enter. All right. We want to pick the second one because the storage, all that kind of stuff, that's going to be handled by Proxmox. So let's just do the real basic UFS. Okay. We want to make sure to pick that 64 gig drive. And yes. And move over to yes. And we'll let it go. And depending on your system, this will probably take about 5 minutes or so. So the cloning thing or whatever it is, that's all done. So now we need to set up the root password for the firewall. So I'll hit enter. I'll type in my password. Enter. And type it a second time. Okay. We want a down arrow so we can say confirm and exit. Enter. And now we just want to reboot and say okay. And what's, of course, rebooting is not your physical machine, it's the VM. And we'll just let this do its thing. We don't need to touch anything right now because everything's already been configured. You are most likely going to see where it's going to hit that WAN again, and it's going to sit and be hung up. But again, eventually, when things are being changed and rebooted, it's going to go through here a lot faster. Okay, it's doing its startup. Now we can log in. This time we type in root. And now we type in the password that we set earlier. Okay, and we see that the LAN, VTnet1, and this is going to be how we're going to connect to the web GUI. So now we can switch, come up here, and we type in 192.168.1.1. All right, it's not private, that's fine. Okay, again, type in our username, password. And when it's starting up, it's going to go through this wizard. We'll say next. You can set your time zone, language, what you want to do, domain, what you want to call it, if you want to add any DNS servers. If I wanted to add, let's say, Google, say next. WAN is going to be through DHCP, which makes sense. And this is going to be our IP address for our LAN. We'll say next. I don't know why it has us do it again, but I think it's because depending on how you do the configuration, you may not have given the root password. So just use the same one again. And then just apply. A lot of places in OPNsense, you have to remember to hit apply. You'll do all your settings, and you'll even, it's nice, it will kind of remind you up at the top, hey, this is great, but you haven't applied anything. You haven't set the stuff up. If we go to dashboard, kind of gives some information about, the version and various things that are running. So memory, not bad. It's only using, what is that? Maybe not even 7%. You can see your CPU. It knows that it's on a virtual machine as it's running through. So you may run into a situation in which you plug in the LAN port from your Proxmox machine into a port on your switch that is set up to be tagged. And now if I try to access anything on the server, I'm getting these errors where it basically can't connect to the Proxmox server anymore. So what I need to do is I'm going to switch it back to a untagged port, and now I can see it again. So then what I want to do to allow me to be able to plug into those tagged ports is at this level, I want to go into network. I want to find the bridge that I'm using for the LAN. I want to edit it, And I want to turn this on, VLAN aware, and say OK, and then apply the configuration. Then I can come here, I can go to the LAN and change this to VLAN 1 or tagged with 1. Say OK. Now I should be able to switch to that tagged port. Now when I move around, no problem. So I'm able to get connected. So those are the kinds of things to look out for in cases, especially if you're trying to introduce this new network appliance into an existing infrastructure. I wanted to also point out that once you get OPNsense working and deployed on your network, you want to go back here into the options for OPNsense. And for start at boot, you want to double click and you want to check this on so that way whenever the machine starts up fresh, it's going to start up your OPNsense VM. You may also want to set here for the start shutdown order, set that to a 1. That way it will always be the first thing if you happen to have more than one VM running on your Proxmox server. This way the OPNsense would be the first one that starts up, and it will also in reverse be the last one that shuts down. Now, my guide today is just, only scratches the surface of OPNsense. What you'll want to probably do is watch other videos. One resource that I used for research on this was Home Networking Guy, and he went through various, the very simple to the much more complex, and all using OPNsense, also OPNsense under Proxmox. So I would check some of those other resources to truly get a sense of, how to set up OPNsense. The question might also be is, well, why did I use a G3 versus a G4, G5, etc.? Well, I didn't want to sort of sacrifice or use a more expensive unit for something that I could get by with just a G3. Now, obviously G2 and G1 is not going to work because I won't be able to add that second network port to it. But with G3, I could either go for the ProDesk or for the EliteDesk. In my particular circumstance, I had an extra ProDesk that I could use. It wasn't set up for Wi-Fi. It was a perfect candidate, so that's what I used for it. You can, by all means, use a G4, a G5, and I do have my videos that show how to add a second NIC to it, and then you would just use the same steps as far as the installation.